Okay, hello and welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Ektron Developer Office Hours. This week we're going to be talking about rebranding and redesign, and specifically how you can architect your code, your content, etc. to facilitate rebranding and redesigning of your sites ongoing. So with that, I do want to say, we have taken a couple weeks off, so thank you everybody for coming back. And if you have any questions, reach out on Twitter using the Ektron OH hashtag, and that, to credit Jonathan Graham, is not to be confused with Ektron Ohio. It's Ektron Office Hours, Ektron OH on Twitter. So we'll take those questions live. The questions can be anything web dev related. And with that, I'll let Chris introduce himself first.
Hi guys, my name's Chris Jacques. I also go as a CJ. I've been a web developer at Johnson & Wales for the past 6 years working with Ektron, and I manage the web development team there now. We've done everything from maintaining existing sites to spinning up a bunch of new sites using items all over the Ektron feature set. So it's good to be with you today. Thank you.
Good to have you back. And Joe.
Hi, my name is Joe Mayberry. I'm a web developer with WSOL and a lead Ektron partner. I've been working with Ektron since 2007, version 7.5, I think. I had a short stint as a developer for Ektron, the professional services group, and now I'm here.
Yeah, we had a good team going, Joe. We had a good team. Yeah, J3. So it was James, Joe, and a guy named Jason. It was good. And Ken.
I'm Ken McAnder. I'm a senior technology consultant with Celerity and another Ektron partner. I've been working with it since 2009. I got out of the tail end of 7.6 and pretty much got on at 8. So I avoided the blue look and went right to the orange.
Yeah, you jumped in at a good time. The only better time to have jumped in would have been 8.5.
Yeah.
Yep. Big difference. Big difference. Yep. All right, so let's start with rebranding, which in my mind is more on the content side of things than the code side of things. There are obviously things you can do in code to facilitate rebranding, but when we talk about rebranding, what does that mean to you guys? Chris, I'll start with you. What's rebranding mean?
Well, to me, I think it's a change of how your product or your service, your brand is recognized visually, right? It could be logos, taglines, even a printed slogan, things like that, and they're usually stem from something much greater than that, in a strategy to drive a new identity of the company. And how can we best sum up this new identity, essentially?
Right. So, Joe, Ken, before we move on, anything to add to defining what a rebrand would be?
I thought that was a great definition.
Yeah.
We'll go family feud with that. Good answer. Good answer.
Good answer. Good answer. No, I think that's absolutely. It's always been a visual recognition of the brand in my mind as well. And Chris, we were talking a little bit before, and you're actually getting ready to enter into a rebranding project. Is that right?
Yes, from what I've been hearing from the top coming down, that's something Johnson & Wales can expect in 2015. So now you know about as much as I know, but I think in higher education generally, the nature of the stability of the product itself, I think, is changing. The sitting in the classroom for 4 years, getting your degree, guaranteed a job to keep you in middle class for life, isn't the way things really work anymore. Institutions are really catching on to that and trying to find ways to really just extend the reach of learning to adapt to people's lifestyles, schedules, and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure what to expect from my place of employment, my institution. I could see it going any number of ways as far as the new spin and angle they want to put on things.
So you could be facing more than a rebrand. You could be facing a rebrand plus a full redesign as well. And I think that university, in my mind, with the projects I've worked on, universities tend to have a lot of brands. that they work with, because it's not just the university, but it's the athletics program, or it's the
Indeed.
debate club, or whoever can have their own brand. And so rebranding is something that I would expect to see fairly often in a university, because they have so many brands under that umbrella.
Indeed, yeah. It's like it's more like a city than a business, James. And just as you walk down and you see your cafe, your dry cleaner, and everything. I mean, the equivalent exists in a university, and everybody does need to have an individual yet universal identity as well.
Yeah. So going into this new project where you're going to be going through a rebrand, you have, I think at some level you have to accept the possibility that 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, you could be rebranding that project again. You could be updating logos. You could be maybe not updating color schemes, because you don't want everybody buying new pom-poms and jerseys all at the same time. But I think that there's often a need to facilitate rebranding. What other situations, Joe and Ken, do you see warranting a rebrand? Why are your clients rebranding typically?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. Changes in focus for a company, or acquisitions. Lots of things happen that would prompt a rebranding, and sometimes it's major, sometimes it's minor. Sometimes it could just be small, subtle changes to a logo. Over time, things like that. So it's there's a lot of different reasons why a company might go through a rebranding effort. Probably the most successful ones I've seen have been, it usually falls into two categories. It's either going to be a major rebranding and redesign effort, or a fairly minor one, where it's just small changes that they do incrementally.
Yeah, I mean, some people may even rebrand, for specific events, like, election times coming up. A news website might rebrand itself to put more emphasis on the election and bring that content more to the front, and stuff like that. And that's where you get into content strategy, in terms of, do you hold on to, do you keep the content strategy you have, or are you planning ahead for that kind of flexibility? Are you doing it as a one big site with a lot of tentacles underneath? Are you doing like multi-site? Coming up with those scenarios and trying to plan ahead for that. And of course, if you plan ahead well, you're okay for rebranding all that, and you can be flexible. But in the event that you didn't think that way to begin with, then you have to start thinking about, do you want to restructure your entire content tree, which might require restructuring of your design and your architecture.
Okay, so I think you're referring back to your C-SPAN days with the election example there.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I know you've had a lot of late nights with elections and debates and such with that organization. So what would you say is, and let's, we can use Chris's kind of unknown, nebulous rebrand out in the future here, but what would you be your advice to Chris to say, here's where you need to start thinking, here's the planning you need to do now in order to prepare yourself for the upcoming rebrand and subsequent rebrands that may occur after that?
Probably my first thought would be, how much control are individual entities going to have over the authoring experience, over the management experience in general? For example, are they going to have very limited control? It's going to be kind of a centralized editorial group, or is it going to be very distributed among the different departments and schools and groups of the university? In that, the more distributed you get, you might want to start going multi-site instead of just branching it down the folder structure. And that could also be from a standpoint of URL branding. Say you got JWU, for example, .edu. Are you going to have that /engineering school, or are you going to have engineering school.jw.edu? You can certainly alias and use aliases and everything to point around to different pages, but I think if you use multi-site in that case, where you're using third-level domains, you're going to find it a little bit easier to maintain your individual entities, and then you can permission it out and say, okay, you're getting this piece, etc. So, I mean, that's kind of the high level I'd start at, is just what kind of editorial strategy is it going to be when running this thing?
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. And yes, if a multi-site could be a good opportunity to please individual departments and entities of that way if we do end up going a multiple subdomain route. So that's a good point. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, you could do it. I mean, because one thing you might want to do is like you probably want to do different master pages based on different groups. So, like a school may have a complete brand of its own versus the primary college brand. So, like, the football team maybe has their own whole skin to it. And again, you can do it where it's like, all right, based on the URL, I want this master page in place. Do it on the pre-init. And of course, now I'm going to developer speak. Or you could just say, all right, well, the multi-site of the football team is going to point to this template set, and now we're locked in. The good news is with multi-site, even you're sharing the database, so the content is still shareable, and so are widgets and other things. So, you're not having, in either way you do it, you're not having a lot of duplicative, development you have to worry about.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, I would reiterate the reuse of code there, and you can have all of that in one instance in IIS, reuse templates if appropriate, and just swap out master pages. So I think that's good advice. And I've seen an architecture very similar to that recently that is actually scaling up into the hundreds of sites. Of course, it's dependent on traffic and caching and et cetera, but I think that's testament to the flexibility that you have there.
Indeed.
Especially sharing widgets and things like that. Those are the kinds of things that absolutely have to be shared. But you can have base color style sheets and things like that end up getting merged that could be shared across those as well. So you have one style sheet that defines your specific shade of purple and other common elements, common colors and things across the sites, but then individual style sheets for where they need to be different. Okay, so go ahead, Joe.
It's interesting though that Ken, you would recommend going the multi-site. From what I've been seeing and stuff I've been working on recently, I'd actually go more the microsite route, having one parent site and then having individual microsite type subsites throughout the site, going with the jwu.com or .edu/engineering school, for example. In my experience, I think that's a little bit easier for people to navigate because they only have to know one base URL. And there's a lot of things you can do to give each organization or each group within your organization the opportunities to personalize, for that unique group.
Yeah, and one advantage you can do, I would agree, that's typically how I did it. One thing you can also do to kind of get the best of both worlds, because there's also, when you think about putting out your redesigns, your rebranding, you got to think about advertising, marketing, what's easy for somebody to say in a radio ad or put on a poster.
Right.
And some people would say engineering.jwu.edu would be easier than jw.edu/whatever, but you can always take advantage of, just do a redirect, set up a third level domain, and all it says, like, you are going to redirect to a site, and bam, it redirects you right to, the microsite look.
Mm-hmm.
So you can certainly do it that way. I'll be honest, I've never done multi-site. I've heard about it. I think Kenny has done a lot of that. One of our other occasional Ektron guys that pops on these things, he's done multi-site before. I've definitely gone more the microsite route, and if you do it right, you can get the different skins in there with different master pages or whatever you want to do, and still, again, you can do it either way. It'll work out. So.
Good deal.
I think one of the key things to it, no matter what route you go, is planning. Figure out what you want to do and have a good idea of how you're going to do it before you start building it. That will pay off.
Yeah, I think that's a running theme in the last several office hours episodes we've had. Is you need to have a plan before going into it. And,
I think speaking of that too, guys, it's a redesign from Rebrand is also a good opportunity to develop to your analytics. To get your latest analytics stats and those those weak points that you haven't had a chance to patch up. It's the perfect opportunity to redo your URL structure. For instance, just one really high level thing.
Yeah, if you can change the content architecture, then yes, absolutely. It's a great time to go through content curation as well. Does this content really make sense as part of the new branding strategy?
Yeah.
And if not, drop it.
And one advantage I'll say of Ektron is that if you're doing your aliasing architecture one way, like say you're doing it with folder architecture, you can make a change without necessarily moving all your content around by switching your primary aliasing type. Like if you go to a taxonomy alias, for example, you don't need to use a ton of manual aliases because that'll take forever to maintain. That's good for setting up your starting point of your microsites, but from there, use taxonomy or folder aliasing, and you can organize your content that way. Taxonomy aliasing does give you a little more flexibility because then like I say, you don't have to shunt your folders around. If you do use folder aliasing, the one thing I try to remind people of is there's a setting in there for exclude path. So if you want your content to be like, home and then, a bunch of folder names you don't really want to see in a URL, you can alias it and take all those folders out of it and just start it at a certain point.
Okay.
Yep. And what multi-site will allow you to do is segment some of the features of the CMS. So if you need an About Us alias for 2 different departments, then doing multi-site will allow aliasing to be segmented from site to site. You cannot have 2 About Us aliases without doing multi-site.
Well, you can. It's just that one would have to be, because you can do an alias with I'll call it multi-level, where you can do, engineering / About Us as a manual alias. You can set that up.
But they can't be both top-level paths.
Right.
And if you somehow manage to make that happen, then it's always going to go to first found.
Right.
Whichever one that may be. So we've got a couple of questions on Twitter. So this is Catherine, aka Super Design Girl, on Twitter. Any suggestions for building confidence with users in a rebrand and redesign? Many of my users are not thrilled with the redesign.
You will like it and enjoy it.
Communication.
Not the way I
do it. No. But I think that's going to be the biggest thing is communicating with your end users, with your stakeholders, all the people involved or impacted. Give them a chance to understand why you're doing it and what you're doing, and if appropriate, chances to offer suggestions.
Yeah, I would definitely say when it comes to the stakeholders in a rebrand, redesign, make sure you have the right stakeholders. We've run into situations before where there's been the representative committee of stakeholders to say this is what we want the design to be, this is what we want the functionality to do, and then we build it and you get to launching it and you get to beta testing and the user's like, what the heck is this? And you're not having the buy-in because they didn't go to those individual users. I mean, you don't have to go to every user, of course, but they didn't get to a representative sample to say, I need it to do this, and I need it to do this. And, I mean, sometimes you're just going to have to, people are just going to have to understand, it's not going to work the same way it used to, and we're doing this, again, communication, as Joe said, the communication is, we're doing this for future enhancements and flexibility, not just for the immediate, we're not redesigning for a redesign's sake. We're not just doing this just to mess with your minds.
So I agree with all of that. I think that it's hard to overestimate the importance of involving the stakeholders in the site. I think we need to be clear about who the stakeholders are. The stakeholders are not necessarily the person who enters the press releases. That is not necessarily a stakeholder. A stakeholder is somebody who has more decision-making authority than that. That's where I would seek some top-down buy-in. Because if you can get top-down buy-in, then everybody will be on the same page through the hierarchy. I think there's a bit of sales strategy that goes into it as well, and talking to the decision maker is part of a sales strategy. If somebody coming wants to sell Ektron $50,000 worth of services, they're talking to me, they're talking to the wrong person. I don't have the authority to buy $50,000 worth of services. I may weigh in on that, but it doesn't make me a key stakeholder in the decision on that. So I think there's a bit of sales there. But it's definitely challenging. Involvement, education, transparency, very important things. And setting yourself up, I think, as the expert. Not the hero necessarily, but the expert. If you set yourself up as the hero, then everybody's going to call you for everything, but you do want to be an expert.
Yeah.
And I see David responded to that as well. With change is tough for everyone, which is true. Catherine also has a question. Any suggestions for designing a 3-tier architecture or converting an old site to a 3-tier architecture? I think that's a bigger discussion than an office hours discussion, unless you guys have some words of wisdom there that can be shared briefly.
Well, briefly, I mean, you can. The good thing is with the way I haven't done it, but the way I understand the 3-tier architecture to be, you've got basically an entire Ektron site, but it's sitting in a middle tier, and all you're doing on the presentation side, the production web server side, let's call it, is a smaller subset of the work area to support page builder, etc. And then your pages are out there. So it's kind of like it's just a bridge connector. So, I mean, if you're doing it from scratch, then, the 3-tier min is there, as well as, that you'll need is in the package. If you're trying to convert a site, it doesn't strike me as it being very difficult. I mean, you'd have to get the config set up right and everything. Depending on how you design and architect your code, though, it may not be a very difficult prospect if you can kind of pick up your custom code and then say, all right, I'm going to drop in a CMS 400 min from my business layer. I'm going to drop in a 3-tier min for my presentation layer, and then bam, here's my custom code on top of that, and you're pretty much locked in at that point.
A lot of it depends on what that custom code is, or what your display logic is. If you're using something like a list summary, then that's probably not going to work in a 3-tier because it doesn't use the new framework APIs. So Ektron 3-tier is dependent on framework APIs and controls that use framework APIs. So I think the out-of-the-box content block widget, if you're using a 3-tier min site, the content block widget will work fine. A couple of other widgets will work fine, but you have to look at it very objectively and start asking, what am I going to lose if I go to this architecture? And is the trade-off worthwhile? Why do I want a 3-tier? What am I going to lose if I go 3-tier in the current state of Ektron, which is going to change over the next 6-12 months? There will be changes around how we support 3-tier and what we can support in that model. But at the current time, why are you doing it? What are you going to lose? Make the business decision for whether you need to do that or not.
It's the same as if you're deciding that you want to go right now into an MVC structure. James, as you know from doing the Synergy website, you can do quite a lot. You can still do a lot of the stuff with Ektron, but unless you really want to get in there and wire things up, you're going to have to sacrifice Page Builder, for example.
Yes, absolutely.
There
would be a lot. There would be a lot that you would have to rewire if you wanted to have similar functionality to what's provided in a 2-tier model.
Yeah.
I did write a blog post recently on basically some frequently asked questions around MVC. MVC is by nature 3-tier with Ektron, so a lot of your 3-tier questions will be answered in that article. If you're not planning to do MVC, then some of the answers will change slightly. So we have display support for Page Builder that would not support targeted content and multivariate testing, but some of the other widgets would work fine as long as they're framework API based. They're going to work fine.
I think the most important thing you guys touch on with this too is, and that's if it works for you. A simple cost-benefit analysis of jumping into, a new technology and a new infrastructure. If you're doing a rebrand and a redesign, it's a great time to do that too. There's great features out there for great reasons. Not all of them is for every implementation too. So just sit back, see if it's going to be worth the effort in the long run ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So David has a comment on that. In internal rebrand, let's see, I was part of had mixed feedback. The rebranding had mixed feedback, took end user questions, routed and answered them. Catherine follows up, is three-tier the way to go to separate the presentation layer from the data layer? Seems much easier to maintain.
So this kind of segues.
It does. What I want to be clear about, Catherine, is that three-tier is more server architecture, not code architecture. And what you're talking about with data layer versus presentation layer is more code architecture. Ken, did you have something you could show Catherine around that in the last couple of minutes?
Yeah. She actually brought this question up, I think, yesterday or the day before, around the smart forms. And, you guys know smart forms are kind of my thing. Desktop.
I love smart forms.
Yeah.
So, while you're pulling that up, in the rebrand thought exercise that we've got, because you mentioned smart forms can be an integral part of managing your ability to rebrand in the future. And that is using something like a configuration or a setting smart form to define this is what my logo is via smart form. This is what the logo links to. This is the copyright statement, things like that are content that a lot of people don't actually think of as content. You can manage all of that in a smart form, translate it, and it makes it easier to swap those values in and out at a later date.
Yeah. So
one thing, if I could just add to that real quick.
Sure.
One thing that we kind of do with smart forms, having a global configuration smart form, but then we also have an additional smart form for folder level settings that we can assign different folders to it to override some of the global settings. So if you have something, this leads more into a microsite type setup, but if you've got one content within one particular folder that you need or you want to have slightly different branding, that would be one way to go with it, to have something that would override those global settings.
Yeah. All right, Ken, so I'll let you go ahead.
Okay, so what I've got up, I assume you can see my screen and not my smiling face right now, right?
Yes.
Good, because I'm making faces at you guys. No. So what I've got up here is this is actually a multi-tiered project that I did. So you can see there's a number of data layers in here, and if you go and check out some of my past blogs that I've written on my own blog site, I've actually got a lot written around the different stuff here, so I won't go into everything, but this is the idea basically for the smart form. So what we're looking at right now, this is the generated class from the XSD of a smart form. So we've got this thing where it's just generated out. This is a very simple smart form, 3 fields, or actually 2 fields. This is something else I'm working on. So pretty simple, straightforward smart form. But when we communicate with this is only basically a link up to work with the smart form itself to get data to and from it. I also have, as you can see, a custom class of my own where I've written in, again, a message and a more link here. So that's a custom class. And then there's the data layer. So in the data layers, we're actually going in here and saying, all right, Ektron, I want you to go out there. Here's the content criteria, folder, property, all of your Ektron APIs are in here. And then it's looping through this, and you can see it's calling the smart form, that global alert smart form, but it's looping through and it's putting all the data into my custom class instead of directly interfacing with the smart form. And that's in case You make changes to your smart form later on, but also so you can manipulate the data however you need to manipulate it, and you can combine things without having to think about it. So you can see here, this is actually getting the content ID as well as this 2 of the smart form fields. So we dump that in there, and then we pass it up along to a manager class where it's doing some more logic. So it's already gotten a list of that. All that did was strictly get a list of the alerts. This is going through the alerts and saying, all right, well, now we're going to remove some based on what user we're talking about. Where this falls into, I think, some of the talk about 3-tier separation that Catherine was mentioning is you'll notice that we have a data class, this DAO, and a business class. So the DAO is just doing data connections to Ektron, passing the data along to my custom class. The manager has no idea what Ektron is. This manager class couldn't care less if it's Ektron behind there or if it's a custom written thing. Where that can come in handy is for test development. If you want to do mock classes, you could write a data layer behind this that is just a whole set of mock classes and do your data that way and separate it out from Ektron. Again, without going too much into detail, the other thing this can do is if you're just using the APIs to do all your work and not so much your server controls, for example, you can isolate Ektron's DLL calls to one class, and you don't need to have them everywhere. So if you're upgrading, you only have a certain set of DLLs you have to upgrade, and only in a very constrained area. So this model serves a couple of purposes, but it basically takes the basic smart form, from Ektron, and then throws it up the line into pure data classes, and from there you're just doing what you would do with any .NET object, and Ektron doesn't even matter in the scheme of the universe.
Right. The only exception to that would actually be Page Builder, because you would need Page Builder.
Yeah.
If you want to use that feature,
Page
Builder would have to be integrated into the templates.
Yeah, with Page Builder you have an advantage, disadvantage, because the advantage is it's user control based, so you can just put the references into the page and be done with it. If you don't have the all the other references like the work area in there, what the heck was that? All right, there's a dinosaur attacking.
Sorry.
Anyway, you wouldn't have IntelliSense because you wouldn't have the actual user control references without the work area, but you could still work around it without needing the DLLs to be there in your development project. You may notice this is a web application project, not the Ektron website project. But like I said, right. I've written blogs about that, so people can go check that out.
So I think the idea here, to try to distill it a little bit, is by putting your Ektron code into another layer, and this is the layers we're talking about, not tiers, but by putting that Ektron logic into another layer, into its own class library, your presentation doesn't really matter what the CMS is at that point. As long as you're able to return your own view models, your own custom objects to that presentation layer from whatever system, it makes things a lot easier to swap in and out, to do unit testing, to reuse your code. So if you were to centralize your code to return blog posts or something like that in one of those layers, then you can call that method to return blog post from any widget, any control, any page that you happen to write without having to have multiple copies of the same logic in a lot of different places. And that, to me, facilitates redesign in a much, much better way. So you have all of your models pre-existing, you're just changing the markup that gets applied to those models. All right, and we're 5 minutes over. And I think if Dan McGarry says Bazinga one more time, then I'm going to have to shout it or something, so we better sign off. He's really latched onto that, I think.
I mean, I hashtagged it as a word of the day thing, but good grief, the man has gone crazy with it. Just because you're wearing a Sheldon Flash shirt.
I'll have you know that this is not a Sheldon-specific Flash.
This is true.
This is just Flash. Mine does not say Bazinga on it, as the Sheldon shirts do.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm at the office, but if I'd known this was superhero T-shirt, Dad, I brought my Green Lantern shirt or my Batman shirt and worn it.
Yeah, we need to try to get that photo at Synergy. We
can make it happen.
We'll get the whole team together. Yeah.
There we go.
All right, so Joe, watch out for the Raptors.
Yep.
Or Tyrannosaurs, whatever that was. We hope to see you next time, whole, intact, no missing limbs, no chewed off pieces. And no, it's great. So we'll be back on the air next week unless anything comes up. So talk to you guys soon, and we're going to sign off, go off air. Anybody has any follow-up questions after this, in between episodes, please do reach out on Twitter using hashtag Ektron or hashtag EktronOH. EktronOH is probably going to put you into a feed where you're not going to get buried right now.
To answer one of Dan's earlier questions, no, we're not going to tell you what we're going to talk about off air. We're going to talk about James's Flash shirt. That's what we're talking about.
No, you have to participate to be part of that conversation. You have to be on this episode. So next time, Dan, you can come on next week if you want. All right, guys. I'm going to stop broadcast. We'll see you on the other side. So thanks a lot.
Thanks
for James.